Here's a simple question. You have a friend, maybe it's you, who is never, not once, on time, not 5 minutes early, not even on the dot, always 5, 10, sometimes 20 minutes behind, every single time, for years. And here's the part that doesn't add up. This person isn't lazy. They're not disorganized in other areas of their life. They genuinely feel bad about it. So why can't they fix something this simple? The obvious answer is the one most of us reach for first. They just don't value your time as much as their own. It's carelessness. Or at best, a bad habit they've never bothered to break. That's the easy explanation. It's also, according to the actual research on this, mostly wrong. Which means the real question isn't why don't they care, it's something stranger. Why would a person who genuinely wants to be on time, who has done this exact commute or this exact morning routine hundreds of times before, still consistently misjudge how long it takes? To answer that, you have to go back to a discovery made in the late 1970s by the psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, who noticed something odd while studying how people predict the future. They found that when people estimate how long a task will take, any task, from writing a report to leaving the house, they consistently guess to low, not randomly low, systematically, predictably low, in the same direction, over and over. They called it the planning fallacy, and once you know what it is, you start seeing it everywhere. Home renovations that take twice as long as promised, government projects that run years over schedule, and yes, the friend who says I'll be there in 5 and means it, every single time, and is still wrong, every single time. But that just pushes the question one layer deeper. Why would this bias be so consistent? If it were just carelessness, you'd expect it to be random, sometimes early, sometimes late. No real pattern. Instead, it's one-directional. People don't accidentally overestimate how long things take. They almost always underestimate. Something specific has to be causing that lean. Here's where it gets genuinely interesting. Researchers found that when people imagine a future task, they tend to picture it going smoothly, no traffic, no interruptions, no misplaced keys, no last email that just needs a quick reply before walking out the door. Psychologists describe part of this as a kind of mental presentism. When you're sitting calmly on your couch planning tomorrow morning, you're calm, focused, and clear-headed in that exact moment, and you unconsciously project that same calm, focused, obstacle-free state onto your future self, the one who will actually be living through tomorrow morning with all its mess. The plan gets built by a version of you that isn't accounting for the version of you who will actually have to execute it. So here's the next question this raises, and it's the one that really should stop you in your tracks. Fine, maybe you get fooled the first time, but this same friend has left the house late 100 times before. They know, from direct personal experience, that it never goes as smoothly as planned. Why doesn't that history change the prediction? This is where the rabbit hole goes one level deeper, into something researchers call the inside view versus the outside view. When you predict how long your own task will take, you almost always run an inside view simulation. You imagine the specific steps of your specific morning, in order, as if narrating a story. Shower, get dressed, grab coffee, out the door. That kind of step-by-step imagining is naturally optimistic, because a story flows. It doesn't naturally include and then I get distracted for 11 minutes by a text message. Even if that's exactly what happened yesterday, the day before, outside observers, interestingly, do the opposite. Ask a friend how long they think it'll take you to get ready, and they tend to guess long, because they're not narrating your specific morning. They're pattern matching against every messy morning they've ever seen, including their own. The inside view tells a clean story. The outside view remembers the mess. And almost everyone, predicting their own future, defaults to the inside view, which leads to yet another layer. If the outside view is more accurate, why doesn't experience eventually train people to adopt it for themselves? You'd think after enough failed mornings, the brain would start automatically padding its estimates. Some research suggests part of the answer is almost unfair. People don't just mispredict the future. They also tend to misremember the past duration of similar tasks, recalling previous instances as having gone a little more smoothly and a little faster than they actually did. If the memory being consulted is already quietly rounded down, then even someone honestly trying to learn from experience is learning from a slightly false record. At this point, the rabbit hole splits, because not everyone experiences this bias to the same degree, and the differences turn out to be genuinely revealing. For some people, the planning fallacy is close to the whole story, a generally optimistic person who simply, chronically underestimates how long things take, in exactly the pattern Kahneman and Tversky described. But for others, something additional is happening underneath it. Difficulties with planning and executive functioning, the kind commonly discussed in the context of ADHD. can make it genuinely harder to build an accurate internal sense of elapsed time in the first place. Independent of optimism, for some, it's less about mispredicting the future and more about a weaker internal clock while living through the present, making minutes disappear in a way that's difficult to consciously track. For others, chronic lateness has almost nothing to do with time estimation at all, and everything to do with a very different mechanism: overcommitment and difficulty saying no. Someone who agrees to just one more small thing before leaving isn't necessarily miscalculating how long the drive will take. They're accurately calculating the drive and then stacking an extra task on top of it anyway, because turning down the request in the moment feels harder than absorbing the lateness later. And for some people, lateness has a quieter, more avoidant route. Arriving somewhere stressful, a difficult meeting, an uncomfortable social event, a few minutes late can function, even unconsciously, as a small buffer against anticipatory anxiety. This isn't a universal explanation, and it shouldn't be assumed about any specific person. But among the documented contributors to chronic lateness, avoidance-linked delay is a real and separate pattern from simple time blindness or optimism. There's one more twist we're sitting with, because it reframes the entire question. Almost everything so far has treated lateness as an individual malfunction, something wrong with one person's brain or personality. But time itself isn't a universal, fixed concept the way a stopwatch makes it feel. Different cultural and social environments treat schedules differently. Some contexts run on tightly sequenced, one thing at a time punctuality, where a start time is treated as fixed and lateness reads as disrespect. Others run on a more fluid, relationship-first sense of time, where a gathering starts whenever people arrive and rigid punctuality can read as oddly cold. Neither is objectively correct. They're different systems for organizing the same 24 hours. And someone raised in one system carries its assumptions into the other without necessarily realizing a different set of rules is even in play. So follow the question all the way down. And here's where it actually lands. Why is my friend always 5 minutes late? Started out looking like a simple character judgment. They don't respect your time. But underneath that surface answer is a systematic prediction bias almost everyone shares to some degree, driven by a present, calm version of you building a plan for a future, harried version of you who won't behave the same way. Underneath that is a self versus other asymmetry, where the inside view tells an optimistic story your own memory quietly agrees to reinforce. And underneath that are at least 3 genuinely separate individual patterns: optimistic misprediction, difficulty tracking time itself, and avoidance-driven delay, tangled together differently in different people, sitting on top of cultural assumptions about what a start time even means in the first place. None of this means lateness has zero cost, or that it's never worth addressing. Showing up late repeatedly still affects other people's time, and that's real regardless of the mechanism behind it. But the fix looks different depending on which layer is actually driving it. If it's the classic planning fallacy, the most consistently effective correction researchers point to is surprisingly simple. Stop imagining the task and instead ask how long it actually really took the last several times. Using outside view data instead of an inside view story tends to produce far more accurate estimates. If it's closer to a tracking problem, external structure, alarms, visible timers, built-in buffers, does the internal clock's job from the outside. If it's overcommitment, the fix isn't a better estimate at all. It's a harder boundary earlier in the day. And if a specific kind of lateness only shows up before specific stressful situations, that's worth noticing as its own separate pattern. One a stopwatch was never going to solve. What started as why can't this person just leave the house on time turns out to be less a question about willpower, and much more a question about which quiet mental process, optimism, memory, attention, or avoidance, happens to be steering that particular Tuesday morning. Hit subscribe to Loop Error, because this is exactly the kind of thing we dig into every single video. Here's a question for you. Are you usually the one running 5 minutes late, or the one standing there waiting? And which of these explanations actually matches what's going on for you? Let me know in the comments.